Oh,
Oh, what's wrong?
hi, Leslie. Oh, managed to get a park and waddle in. Bit sore, though.
Have you been having too many orgies again?
Hey, don't reduce me to stereotype.
Oh, wait, no, it was from your latest surgery on your penis.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry for reducing you to a stereotype, but like, you're polyamorous, I'm polyamorous, and apparently all that means is that we just have orgies all the time, right? Like, I'm having one right now. Like, you can't see what's happening underneath the
I
the
wish I
desk
had
here.
that sort of energy.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. So I think today is a good opportunity to dispel some myths about polyamory, but also talk about books, because we're a book podcast,
Yeah.
that can be really helpful resources for learning what polyamory is
Mm-hmm.
and what it is not, and talk about other ways to learn about it. What do you think, Meka?
It sounds like a great idea.
All right, let's do it. Welcome to Thriving Between the Lines, the podcast that examines personal development books through the lens of intersectionality. I'm life coach and slut, apparently, leslievcoaching Garcia.
And I'm Meka, a commitment phobe out to destroy the nuclear family.
And together, we're not just reading between the lines, we're thriving
between the lines.
All right. And we are coming to you again from Mianjin, or Brisbane, land of the Yagara and Turrbal people, where sovereignty has never been ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. It does feel a little bit awkward making an acknowledgement of country after such a crude opening. I feel like a lot of people are gonna be like, no, we don't want to, we don't want any acknowledgement connected to what you're saying right now. Ooh.
Well, we're just trying to break down all those colonial structures.
Oh yes, excellent. So we opened up with we opened up our
Why?
discussion with a bit of a play on some common myths about people who are polyamorous,
Yes.
right? And there are reasons that these myths persist even among polyamorous people, which is interesting. But before I get too rambly about that, what is your definition when someone asks you like, oh, what does it mean to be polyamorous? What is your explanation?
Pretty much just that you are open to having, polyamorous, I would say romantic or emotional relationships with other people. Generally with a sexual element, but there's of course people that have just romantic relationships without physical elements as well. So I guess it's more about the love and that like amorous love.
Yeah. And to really oversimplify the whole thing, polyamory falls under the umbrella of ethical non-monogamy. Yeah. It's not exactly the same as having an open relationship. It is a form of open relating, but when we use words like open relationship, that tends to suggest that there's a core primary couple that has permission, essentially,
Yes.
to have sex with people outside of that relationship. Whereas in polyamory, at least from my perspective and from many other people's perspectives, it's about not just having permission, because that's such a gross word, but having the support to pursue other intimate relationships.
Yes.
Whether that centers around a primary couple or not, because some people don't start their polyamorous journey as a monogamous couple.
Yeah. Like you can completely be a polyamorous person. Like you're not in a poly or any relationship, but that is the type of relationship you seek.
Like solo polyamorous?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I say it round the other way?
You said monopolo. Monopoly.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, so like
monogamy.
Solo. Like a monopoly relationship typically refers to one in which there's a pairing and only one person is pursuing relationships with other people.
Oh.
Yeah.
I swear, all of the definitions and stuff in poly spaces are so hard because, there's also people's different interpretations of those terms.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's so, not official. It hasn't been well established yet.
Yeah, there isn't, an official rule book
for
polyamory. And I guess this is a good time to clarify some of the language here. Using expressions like poly versus polyam or polyamorous is also a little contentious as well. I tend to say polyam, I think.
I don't, because I don't always feel amorous. So I prefer poly because for me it extends to all relationships.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to find that barrier.
Yeah. One of the issues that people have sometimes with expressions like poly to describe polyamorous relationships is, I think it tends to be more relevant to online communities as well, because #poly is there's a sense of ownership in the Polynesian community.
Oh.
Yeah. Sometimes the leaning towards polyam versus poly is out of respect to the Polynesian community. Yeah.
Then how do we make space for aromantics in that space then? Because polyam to me is not leaving any space for aromantics.
Yeah. And see, this is again an illustration of where the languaging and stuff around this can be a little bit tricky. So context is important here. So without wanting to offend anyone, without wanting to misrepresent our feelings about anything, we will be using various terms interchangeably because of the very specific context that we're talking about this in. And I think that works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not going to be like, Meka, you big racist.
Yeah. I'm thinking
or
about...
Leslie, you big racist.
I'm thinking about how the trans community feels very connected to the trans prefix.
Yeah.
But then transport companies are always trans.
Language is sticky like that.
Yeah.
So, moving on. So, Meka, before we get into the books and resources and things, what are some things that throughout your polyamorous journey, what are some of the things that you really had to learn a lot about in the beginning?
I think probably making rules versus boundaries and negotiation around that. Because I very much dislike being told what to do. And due to past relationship trauma, any trying to control of my behavior by another partner is very unacceptable.
Yeah.
So it's very important to me that all kind of negotiations between partners is done as boundary setting and negotiation and finding the common ground.
Yeah.
And doing that early in a relationship, going, will we be able to mesh? Do our boundaries align in such a way that this can work? Because it also depends what boundaries they have with other partners.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's better to just not invest that time and energy into a new relationship if you're just not going to be able to have an ethical relationship.
That's one of the things that is really important and that a lot of people tend to get confused. When people first start off in any kind of ethically non-monogamous way of relating, there's this idea that you have to have very clear ground rules in order to protect that core relationship, because that's what matters more than anything. And it's rules, rules, rules. And like you said, being told what to do and traumas associated with that, those are very real considerations that need to be taken.
Mm-hmm.
So telling someone what they are allowed to do and not allowed to do not only restricts that individual, but anyone else that they then have any kind of intimate connection with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not cool.
No. And there's also a way that some people use boundaries as a way, like they're calling them boundaries, but they're emotionally blackmailing someone into what they want. Mm-hmm. And that is now a rule. Like, I think it's totally acceptable to say, like, this is what I'm comfortable with. And if this isn't, like, you have a different perspective, maybe our relationship isn't going to work in this form anymore. But you shouldn't ever use that as like a, like, I want to sleep with other people. That's my boundary. And if you don't like it, I'm just going to break up with you.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, it's better that you just break up, but then don't coerce someone into being in a poly relationship that they don't want to be in.
And it's not that it doesn't happen, because it very much does happen, right? But there's this idea that the majority of polyamorous relationships are like a cis man forcing his cis girlfriend into this abusive dynamic that she couldn't possibly want. He just wants to sleep with a bunch of people. And there's no way that she, like, how could she possibly agree to this? Like, there must be some coercion there. And again, it does happen, but
I've seen it just as much in the other direction as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've seen more of it in the cishet polyamorous community, but maybe that's just my bias. Yeah, the implied power dynamics from our culture, you do have to kind of be careful there. We have, men are often seen as above a woman in certain ways in society. And, a mother is supposed to just be a carer for her children. So how could she possibly have time for another partner?
And I can definitely say from my personal experience and the experiences of many, many, many other people that I know who are in the polyamory community, again, I'm always really careful about saying this part. I grew up exposed to models of open relating and polyamory that made it not seem like something strange or odd to me.
Oh, that's interesting. That's quite unique, I would say.
Yeah.
I'd say the majority of people grew up with it either only being a thing on TV that was seen as negative.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I've always had a polyamorous baseline, but found myself just defaulting to a lot of monogamous relationships at various points throughout my youth and my adulthood.
Yeah.
But then my relationship with Tony, my spouse, we started off monogamous and then opened up due to my prompting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had developed feelings for a friend that were such that it felt really natural and positive and uplifting to the point where I wanted to talk to Tony about it. And it didn't feel like any threat to our relationship whatsoever. So when I brought it up with them, they had some questions about whether they just weren't doing enough, whether they weren't enough for me.
Yeah.
And those kinds of initial questions. But Tony's also very philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very lucky in that they were open to just saying, like, well, yeah, let's talk about this some more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the end, I never got together with that other friend.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the point, really.
Yes, it was noticing that was a part of you, that you do love non-monogamously.
Yes.
And I do think there are people that are just monogamous, like they very much naturally monogamous.
Yeah.
I know plenty of them. They have no eyes for anyone else.
Yeah, I know a lot of them too.
Mm.
Some of them are just way too cute. It's so unfair.
Yeah,
like the issue for me is that sometimes, like, there's some monogamous folks that I'm just like, gosh darn, I wish you were polyamorous. Like, you're too cute. It's not fair.
I mean, it seems simple to have just one relationship that you can work on.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fewer moving parts, so to speak.
Yeah. I don't know. Don't ask me. I still have a very much developing thoughts and opinions, and even trying to untangle myself.
And that's a really good illustration of the fact that the whole journey through any form of ethical non-monogamy, there isn't some grand finish line that you get to and you're like, I've ticked all the boxes, so to speak.
Yeah.
And now I know everything, and everything I do is ethical because I am an ethical non-monogamist. Yeah.
And just because you haven't read a non-monogamy book doesn't mean you're unethical.
And as you know, one strong component in the coaching that I do, one of my core special interest areas, is in polyamory coaching.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with helping people navigate their internal journey through these things, looking at jealousy and insecurities and time management and all of the things that are required. And then also how those things impact the other people that they're relating to.
Yes.
Right. And that's a very oversimplified explanation of the kind of work that I do with people who are polyamorous or interested in polyamory.
Yeah. I think that just the concept of the chain reaction that your actions have on so many people, even though it is the case in all relationships, it becomes forefront and a consideration that you're made to, well, you should be making.
Yeah.
And you can see it clearly, like, oh, my action towards this person affects this person, this person, this person. And that is true for all relationships, but it's just not brought up.
Yeah. And you mentioned that just because you haven't read, like, a book about ethical non-monogamy doesn't mean that you are unethical.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, you're guided by your ethics and values.
Yeah.
Well, I'm one of those people. I've never read a book on non-monogamy.
Yeah. I'm the opposite. I've read all of them.
Yeah.
Not all of them.
We've
but
got the two.
I've read a lot of them. Right?
The two far sides.
Yeah. But one of the things that I love about, like, diving into actual books about non-monogamy is seeing where a lot of the ideas from the authors overlap and where they kind of diverge. Who is taking a more intersectional approach to the topic and who is looking at it through a very narrow lens?
Yeah.
And that brings to mind one book that is often recommended to people even considering opening up. And I'm holding it in my hands right now. Mika, what is it?
The Ethical Slut.
Yes.
The Bible of non-monogamy.
Yeah. I think for a while, the book More Than Two was considered kind of a Bible for...
This is my generation.
Yeah. a lot of issues have come up with more than two, centering around like the authors or one of the authors in particular, and some ethical violations and some not so great behavior that kind of you could kind of see if you were reading between the lines in the book where there was room for abuse and just not great behavior. So I don't even have my own personal copy of that book in here. I had one that I was borrowing for a while, but I've got like all the other books. But yes, the Ethical Slut, Janet Hardy and Dossie Easton, the 3rd edition. That's kind of the new go-to for a lot of people because, or the 1st edition in particular, apparently wasn't very intersectional, right? It was a very narrow lens, whereas in the 3rd edition, there are insights that impact people from different communities.
Yeah.
In a way, it's almost a little bit of a misnomer saying, because, the word slut is in like really big letters as well.
Yeah.
Because polyamory is not just about sex, and this book isn't just about sex either.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If it was just about sex, it would be very easy, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Emotions
would we
is
even
where
have
it
to
gets
have
hard.
these conversations?
Yeah.
This is like people having sex with a bunch of different people has been a thing forever in a way that,
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so for a lot of people, that is considered still like the go-to starter book for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think it's a certain type of personality that goes, oh, I'm interested in this. I'm going to go read a lot of books and become like totally knowledgeable about everything non-monogamy, and then we will like pursue other relationships. I'm more on the, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Don't know how we're going to conduct it, but let's talk about it and just talk about how we feel and what we want.
Yep.
And finding where that common ground is and if you can conduct this together.
Yeah.
And that's for each relationship. I guess I would consider myself a relationship anarchist.
Okay. Explain what that is, please.
I would say that, first off, lots of people have their own definitions.
Of relationship anarchy?
Yeah, of every definition.
Yeah.
But particularly relationship anarchy, there's a lot of negative connotation to the word anarchy through cultural reasons. Let's not get into capitalism. Well, it's hard not to. But basically, I would say it's like trying to break down hierarchy in relationships. I guess you could just apply it to your romantic relationships, but to me, it's pretty all relationships. They're all about like just building affection for other people and trying not to place that in some sort of importance boxes and using culturally induced power dynamics or structures. We negotiate what we want out of a relationship, whether it can mesh with the other relationships we have in our life, and deciding together what that's going to look like.
And also immediately brought to mind another book that's considered a starter book in understanding how all this works. Sex at Dawn. Yes.
Tell me about it. I don't know any of these books.
Okay. Well, the thing about Sex at Dawn, it's not a how to be polyamorous book at all. It's more diving into the history. Well, the fuller title is Sex at Dawn, How We Mate, Why We Stray, and What It Means for Modern Relationships by Christopher Ryan and I should have gotten the pronunciation of this. Sakilda Jetha? Yes. And so it goes into like the origins of monogamy and things like that, because it's not necessarily something that as humans we were naturally like predestined to all be.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the implications of those societal structures that kind of made that the norm.
Yeah, there's certainly ways you can see the difference between animalistic nature and the complex people that we are emotionally, intellectually, and it's not simple.
Yeah.
And I probably would be in a different boat if I didn't live in the world I lived in. Particularly, if I lived 100, 200 years ago, that syphilis going around everywhere. Monogamy kind of had some more going for it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing worth mentioning when people question polyamory. They ask about the safety considerations, and that's a very fair question. It's like, well, if you're having sex with all these people, how do you not all have AIDS? It's like, well, first of all, we're not all just running around having sex willy-nilly with everyone. And when people are behaving in a safe and ethical manner, within the culture, for the most part, there's a strong emphasis on protection.
Yes.
Safety. Getting tested very regularly. Getting tested when, before you engage with a new partner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's why I am uncomfortable being in a relationship with someone who has another partner who's not an open negotiator. Or if one of my partners is in a relationship with for instance, a don't ask, don't tell pairing, I'm like, ooh, no thank you.
Yeah.
Been there. But, I personally, I want my entire polycule to be open negotiators. You can, people go, if you're polyamorous, you can't cheat. I'm like, if you cross your partner's boundaries or the boundaries agreed to in a polycule, you have violated the consent of everyone.
Yeah.
So, if you slept with someone unprotected, for instance, which was against your agreements or boundaries, and then don't tell a partner and add that to the polycule, you've violated everyone's consent.
Yeah. The whole, cheating and polyamory thing is another thing that a lot of people don't necessarily understand, that it is indeed possible to cheat in polyamorous relationships. And as you described, it's when you have violated a clear agreement that has been made. That is what cheating is. And a lot of monogamous couples still don't have their heads around what cheating actually is within their relationships.
Yeah.
Right?
So many people think it's not cheating until you've had sex.
Yeah. For some people, cheating is sex. For some people, cheating is hugging someone that they might have an interest in. For some people, cheating is looking at porn.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's things like that.
And you can say, oh, that's so unreasonable, but people have their boundaries, and if your boundaries don't align, you don't have to be together.
Yeah.
But so many, and what I dislike about the just kind of default relationship is that so much is unspoken. It's just we'll assume all of these pre-designated rules.
Like you said, it's those unspoken assumptions that can get a lot of people into hot water as well.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people, they don't really know how to start these conversations. They don't know how to navigate the conversations then either. If our relationship isn't perfect, I just don't want it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Or you just don't love me. If you have any sort of complaint about me, it's oh my gosh.
Cishet men thinking their penis isn't big enough or something.
Oh gosh.
Ugh.
Yeah. And particularly for people new to the whole concept of non-monogamy or couples who are looking to open up, two of the books that I have in my hand right now are really good tools for understanding this. The one is The Smart Girl's Guide to Polyamory by Dedeker Winston. And the other I have here is Multiamory, Essential Tools for Modern Relationships by, again, Dedeker Winston, Jace Lindgren, and Emily Sotelo-Matlack. The reason I'm talking about these two books in particular is that this crew are the hosts of the Multiamory podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They've been talking about these kinds of relationship structures and just the ins and outs of various forms of relationships for a long time. And by putting the information in these books, it's kind of like binging on the podcast, but in reading form.
It probably concentrates many hundreds of hours.
Yeah, yeah.
Which for a fast reader would be faster. For me, it's probably faster to listen to the podcasts.
Yeah. Podcasts like this one. No, podcasts are excellent resources for learning.
Yeah.
Online communities are excellent resources for learning as well.
Yeah, I'm very much a YouTuber for my info and learning.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about Dedeker's book, The Smart Girl's Guide to Polyamory, everything you need to know about open relationships, non-monogamy, and alternative love, it's a great book. It's not girl specific, you know? It's like, okay, all right. So it's still a useful tool for anyone from like any gender identification.
Yeah. That's good to know, because I probably would have looked at it and thought, oh, well, that sounds very binary gendered, like cishet normative. But that's just because any like gendered term gets me on my defense.
Right. And that's fair. Not every book is going to be a perfect fit for everyone.
Yeah.
And that's one reason that I try to read widely across this genre, because there are some books where I'm like, oh yeah, this is a great go-to book that I'm going to recommend to everyone. Some of that is due to my own, just from my own personal background as well.
Yeah.
For example, one book I always recommend to people is Love's Not Colorblind by Kevin Patterson.
What's it about?
Race and representation in polyamorous and other alternative communities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's the kind of book that not everyone's going to go, oh, here's a book about polyamory that I want to read. But I like to shove it into people's faces as a Black woman.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, all right, y'all need to understand that Black people, people from ethnic minority groups or other marginalized communities might be having a very different experience in polyamory than other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my case, and in the case of a lot of, Black women, for example, one of the issues is being overly sexualized and highly fetishized.
Yes.
Being a box to tick, so to speak. What a lot of people don't understand as well, even like in the United States, it wasn't until way too recently in history that it wasn't even considered illegal to rape a Black woman.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Because the assumption was that we were sexual beings who were always on and ready for it. Isn't that disgusting?
That's gross.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell you what, the number of times I've gotten messages just through like dating apps or something where it's dudes wanting race play.
Oh no.
I'm like, no, how is that the first question you're asking me? How is that any, like, in any order of questions, how does that even come up? Like, it's disturbing.
That just brought up that horrible like post about the plantation wedding.
What?
Yeah, this white girl and this Black man in a plantation wedding in America.
Oh.
So gross.
Is it, I mean...
It's race play, but all the way to marriage.
Nice! And this is the thing, right? I'm not here to kink shame anyone.
No.
I'm not here to tell anyone how they should or shouldn't express their own kind of experience of marginalization, subjugation. Sometimes people do that in a way that brings them pleasure. I'm not that. And the assumption when it comes from, like, usually a cis white male saying, hey, are you into this? Like, if it doesn't come from me, do not bring it up.
Yes. Like, the person in the more vulnerable situation needs to be the one introducing the idea, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know particularly what specific race play you might be talking about, but I'm just thinking of these kind of reenacting slavery situations that I've seen online where it could be that that person is working through that, like, trauma of their history.
Yeah.
And that's valid for them.
Yeah.
But for them, and I also want to be very careful and clear in any of those situations that is a very much consensual thing between those people, and do not project it onto the rest of the community or assume that everyone's going to be into it or even want it to be mentioned.
And that's the thing, like, anything that plays on someone's marginalization, if a person from outside of that marginalization is trying to play onto that, like from a top-down kind of way, that suggests that they want to take the reins in a way that's like, oh, especially if it's someone you don't know very well, it's like, no. Yeah. But if it's the other way around, that's a whole different conversation.
Yes.
And just briefly, again, touching on, like, the racial aspects of polyamory, I've got 2 other books here. Why It's Okay to Not Be Monogamous by Justin L. Clardy, who is a black man. And even just reading through, like, what he says, this book is written in a more, like, academic voice.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. But knowing that he's seeing things through that lens as well makes it much more comfortable for me to be like, okay, I'm going to listen to what this guy has to say.
Yeah, I prefer, I guess, academic writing to overly, like, emotional based or personal experience based.
And I've got another book here that I actually have not read this one yet, but it's An African American Guide to Ethical Non-Monogamy, The How, Why, and With Whom to Explore Your Expanding Love Styles by Taylor K. Sparks. Yeah. I'm really keen to sink my teeth into this one because I'm pretty sure that just from the bits I've skimmed, like, I'm pretty sure that it does bring up a lot of similar things to what I've said to you.
Yeah.
Like, in the African American community, there are a lot of religious implications that need to be considered, like whether you're going to be out to your family or not, and that kind of thing, and so many things. So shout out to Taylor Sparks. I will read your books soon. I promise.
I'll be interested to know if it's like the women's guide to non-monogamy. Is that the right?
The Smart Girl's Guide.
The Smart Girl's Guide to Non-Monogamy. Is it useful for those outside of the specified audience?
Well, we'll see. But one of the joys of this is that it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, no, can
this
just be a book.
particular one. Yeah. But yeah, I'll dive into that one and report back to y'all.
Sounds great.
Have you heard of this one?
Very recently, as in today, and I thought, oh, interesting. The Anxious Person's Guide to Non-Monogamy. And as an anxious person, I'm interested.
Yes, this one's by Lola Phoenix, who has a very large online presence around non-monogamy and has written a lot on the subject. What kinds of things do you think, or just by reading the title of the book, what kind of content do you imagine this would contain?
I personally think a lot of jealousy comes from anxiousness. So I would assume jealousy processing. But also, like, am I doing it right? Like, the rules, like, am I doing everything I should be?
From reading this book and from a lot of the work that I've done with my clients, when it comes to anxiety or being an anxious person in non-monogamy, those are certainly topics that are at the forefront of those conversations.
Yeah.
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 And that's even without going into all the things about attachment styles and things like that.
Oh, and STIs.
Oh,
That's
gosh, yeah.
the big anxious thing, I think, for anxious people.
One thing I'll say about this book, though, is it read a bit more like a memoir to me than a how-to guide as such, which is fine.
Which I think is the right way to go if you're basing it on just personal experience and not other research and evidence.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say about Lola Phoenix as well is that they have a huge online presence writing about non-monogamy. They've been published in a bunch of different outlets. And one thing I will say about them as well is that they are a very well-researched writer on non-monogamy.
Okay.
But one of the things, and of course, anyone's welcome to disagree with me, the fact that it feels a bit more like a memoir, I think reading through someone's experience and some of the stages that they've gone through and some of the thoughts that they've had and things they've had to unpack is like a very rich learning environment.
Yeah. It's also very difficult for researchers to quantify and put that into officially peer-reviewed papers.
Yeah.
So learning from each other's experience is the only way to do it sometimes. And so maybe the memoir structure is the better structure for it.
I think for some people it certainly can be more palatable. Because even when we think of how-to style guides for things, I feel almost crude saying it that way because it's like how-to almost like ignores the fact that there are many other people that are involved in these scenarios, and it's not like, okay, you do this, then this, then this, then this. And the last step is enjoy.
My neurodivergent brain loves the idea of there being such a clear-cut, delicious way to just do life. And if you follow the rules, everything will turn out fine.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Oh, that would be wonderful. It's one book that still comes very highly recommended throughout the community.
Yep.
And I love that. But on the topic of jealousy, which you mentioned as a thing that is born out of anxiety and feeds into anxiety.
Yep.
This one, what is it, Meka?
The Jealousy Workbook.
Yeah.
Exercises and Insights for Managing Open Relationships.
Yeah. By Kathy Labriola.
I really like the workbook format of it. Like, I instantly like, university library.
I love having this like within arm's reach at all times throughout my day.
Yeah.
Because it's not a step-by-step guide for how to be polyamorous. It's very specifically about looking at different aspects of jealousy, different jealousy triggers, and things that you can do to try to manage that better. Because again, it's not about eliminating jealousy. It's a normal human emotion that people from all relationship orientations have and experience.
It looks like a great resource for any therapist or life coach person who helps the people guide their lives.
Yeah.
Because, there's just like single things that you could bring up and work on.
Yeah. I do have one little bugbear about the book itself, though.
Oh, yeah?
Can you guess what it is by any chance, just by paging through it?
I'm annoyed that it's not easy to photocopy.
Why? What do you mean? Not easy to photocopy?
Like the ones in libraries that pair with a textbook have spines that make it easy to put it on the photocopier to hand out to class.
Yeah. Well, it's not that for me, but it is more of a publishing related thing. The font.
Oh.
That font drives me. I think we decided that bonkers is already not that great a word to use. It drives me bananas.
It is very frilly for a book.
Yeah.
I don't mind it, but I like frilly writing.
Yeah, I don't. I like my fonts I like a very no-nonsense font. It's like, here.
Yeah.
This is the information.
My partner, Mike, has very specific tastes on fonts.
Yeah. I just find it, because I tend to binge read, I find it challenging to binge read.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I think because I don't binge read, I'm like, yes, this looks interesting and different to other writing. That's why I like lots of fonts.
Okay.
Everything starts looking samey to me. My brain just goes, ooh, big block of text, cannot.
My brain goes, ooh, big block of text. Can.
I would love to.
Chapter 16 in this book is titled, What's Compersion Got to Do with It? Not going to dive too deep into what the book says about compersion, but Meka, can you explain briefly what compersion is?
Compersion is like getting joy and positive feelings when you see your partner with someone else. Or I guess maybe joy from other people's joy, or like positive emotions from watching other people have good experience.
Yeah.
Because I definitely identify as someone who revels in compersion.
Yeah.
Like I love decorating and doing like a party up and then not being like, I just go to the side and watch people enjoy. I don't want to be in the loud, annoying place.
Yeah.
But I just want to watch people enjoying it. And same with like if my partner's got another good partner they're getting good relationship from, I'm just like, hell yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It takes a bit of load off too, because you don't feel like you have to provide everything for the other person.
That is very liberating when you don't have to be someone's absolute everything and their like sole source of intimate entertainment and the physical intimacy, emotional intimacy. I'm using those two things together here. Yeah. That can be really liberating.
My neurodivergence can't be the person that monogamous relationships are set up to be.
Yeah.
You're just supposed to be this be-all and end-all.
Yeah, nah.
Because like the modern nuclear family as well tries to isolate that couple from friendships as well.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like, no, you come home from work and spend all your free time with your partner. Yeah. And you must not have friends of the opposite sex. And just like, I don't know. I don't know how it works. It always has seemed very constraining.
Like something Brian Tracy would write.
Yeah. How dare you be friends with another man?
Yeah.
To Brian Tracy, cheating begins with even speaking to someone of the same, of the opposite sex.
Unless it's for business or work purposes.
Yeah.
Because money matters more than anything else.
Don't know what he would do with a bisexual. No friends for you.
Yeah. Oh, no. That's a callback to our very first book-related episode.
Was it the first one?
That was the first book that we talked about. No Excuses by Brian Tracy.
Yeah.
I know.
Feels like a long time ago.
Yeah. And there's so many different books that are available to dive into the topic.
That's one of the reasons I didn't read them. Because there was too many and I didn't know which one to pick and I knew I couldn't work through all of them.
Yeah. And that's a big barrier for a lot of people. And I don't know if this podcast is going to clarify things for them. I hope it will.
Yeah.
At least make more people aware that more than two doesn't have to be your go-to, like, oh, let's learn how to do this kind of book. The two books I've got in my hand here.
We have Polysecure and Polywise.
Yes. Both by Jessica Fern. Jessica Fern these days is considered kind of a thought leader in the polyamorous, writing about polyamorous space, right? Polysecure came first. The full title, Polysecure Attachment, Trauma, and Consensual Non-Monogamy.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part of the book really dives into, it gives an overview of what we've come to understand generally about attachment styles, right? So secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment. They are illustrated in slightly varying ways across different media, but if you have like no background in attachment theory whatsoever, you might find the first parts of the book really helpful for that. It doesn't necessarily dive into the non-monogamy specific stuff until after the attachment theory questions are clarified.
Yes. I think it is a good, it's a really good book for people who haven't done, general psychology studies or much in the way of starting to even break down thoughts on how all of your emotions are actually interacting and how relationships interact. A lot of people just autopilot it their whole lives.
Yeah.
Which to me is just like, how?
Yeah.
That sounds, well, it sounds easy, but it does not result, like that whole I hate my wife thing or I hate my husband. It's just, to me,
that grossly
epitome,
normalized thing.
like it's the epitome of autopilot relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And saying that, this book I would highly recommend to people who are still struggling to understand how they as individuals have kind of interacted in whatever kind of relationship they've been in up to this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even outside romantic relationships.
Yeah.
If you don't understand how you interact with everybody in your world, how do you even start to have a romantic relationship?
Yeah.
Maybe there's some, maybe neurotypical people can just do that. Or maybe.
I have no idea. Let's find one and ask someday.
Yeah. I think being neurodivergent actually gives you a bit of advantage in that you don't take things at face value. And that does open opportunities.
Yeah.
The other far side of that is you completely detach and won't think about it. And that can be quite destructive.
Yeah.
Incels.
Yeah. And that highlights as well the fact that there are so many, like there's such a almost culture of neurodivergence within the polyamory community.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is culture the right word? Abundance of neurodivergence.
Well, we automatically...
A gaggle of neurodivergence.
We automatically don't feel a connection to like the status quo.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's why there's a lot of us in the trans community as well, is compared to a neurotypical person having the same experience, we're just like, oh, well, I never felt like I fit in anyway, or like this was right for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's just probably easier. And by that, like, easier is not easy.
Yeah.
But easier than someone who feels comfortable in fitting into this pre-made template.
Yeah. So the book that she wrote after that was Polywise. A deeper dive into navigating open relationships.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So the first one's more of an intro, like how do relationships really like mean, what do they mean to you and how do you see them? And I'm asking partly because I only got a few chapters in. But then that's more specific to actually conducting the relationships.
Yeah.
Nice.
So as I kind of tap into my studies in bibliotherapy, did you know I've done that?
No.
Yeah, I have. if you know someone who is entering a polyamorous dynamic or learning about ethical non-monogamy because they're interested in it, I would put these together as a bundle and give them as a gift.
Nice.
It's like, start with Polysecure, then read Polywise, and it's a nice foundation point to at least have a clearer head in how you're going to proceed with things.
So if you kind of have felt, I definitely feel this non-monogamous attraction.
Yeah.
And you're feeling completely lost and you're just kind of like, oh, where do I start? There's so many people, and you go on the internet and they've got different takes on it, or you hear completely conflicting versions. Would you recommend that's a good starting point?
I would.
Nice.
I would recommend it as a good starting point.
Yeah. I think it sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, there's so many books out there. You know, I've got more on my shelf as well. I don't want to go through each and every single title, but all of this is to illustrate the value of actively educating yourself about these non-quote-unquote traditional relationship dynamics. Books, of course, are not the only way to do this, but, and this is something that I find really interesting when I run into people who just do not want to do the work at all of educating themselves, and they're just kind of figuring it out as they go, like completely blind, not even listening to podcasts or reading the forums or anything. And they're just like, oh, I don't have time for all that. And I'm like, okay, hang on. So you don't have a few hours to read a book, but you've got months of time to waste of your own and other people's, creating all this collateral damage along the way. Because it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to learn from, I'm going to subject this person to I'm going to place them in the role of educating me because they are an object in my personal development journey. It's like, that is not cool. Don't do that.
Yeah.
No, that.
Hurting people as you go along is not the best idea.
No.
And pretty unethical.
Yeah. And going, well, I'm new to it, so I'm bound to make some mistakes. Lol, sorry.
But
that's
also,
not cute either.
2 hours to read a book, Leslie.
I didn't say 2. I said a few.
A few. 20. Takes me about 20 hours to read a book that size.
Well, that's fine. But I mean, like, joining a Facebook group or
using an audiobook.
Yeah, audiobooks or meeting with a polyamory coach such as Leslie V.
Yeah, it's
book online, leslievcoaching.com.
It is pretty hard to find like coaches and therapists and things that are like understand polyamory.
Yeah,
I found so.
Especially when you come from marginalized backgrounds and have various intersecting identities that need to be considered.
Yes. Like, that's the thing that definitely comes up in my mind a lot is being trans, like, is a whole thing. I'm sure people have definitely heard about it in the media. Like, there's a kind of idea that a trans person is not as valid as a cis person of that gender.
Yep.
Or non-gender. So finding someone in the already very small pool of polyamorous people who also is on board with that, or another one, being bisexual. A lot of cishet couples don't want, like, a woman dating a bisexual man who's sleeping with other men.
Yep.
I don't know about, as a bisexual woman, if it's the same way, that they find it as repulsive. Like, it's considered particularly repulsive by some certain people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're talking about the bisexual woman that some couples seek out, like, you're talking about unicorn hunters, right?
Oh, that's, yeah.
Yeah. They're like, we want to explore the woman in the relationship's bisexuality with another woman, and we have a strict one penis policy.
No, the one penis policy is a no for me.
Yeah. And a lot of times this whole one penis policy thing is born out of the idea that it's like, well, no, she's already got me and I've got a dick, so why does she need anyone else with a dick?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, if she wants to engage sexually or intimately with other people, why exactly does it matter to you so much that that person can only be female?
Yeah.
Is that pointing to some sort of insecurity that you have? Or is this something that she genuinely has no interest in?
Trans men come into that in an interesting way too. Is it that they don't want another man in the relationship, or is it literally just penis? Like that they're okay with her dating a trans man because we're going to just assume we're talking a pre-bottom surgery trans man. Like, oh, well, he doesn't have a penis to challenge mine.
Or like a sword fight?
Yeah. Or
like jousting.
Is it a masculinity thing? Like she's dating this, wants to date this trans man who's like big and muscular, manly, and makes the other man in the relationship feel like emasculated. It's just he needs to go work out his feelings before somebody gets hurt. Yeah.
And that points to it, particularly in situations like that, like someone could get physically hurt.
Yes.
If someone isn't doing the self-work to understand like what triggers their jealousy, what triggers their insecurity, how they manage that jealousy, things could get violent potentially. But engaging in any kind of alternative relating style or any kind of relationship style really does require a lot of self-work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I find that when I've tried to go into the polyam communities, a lot of the cishet ones, I bump into more people who are just like, have no interest in doing self-work.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're the people who make me really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And not people I want
in a polycule. Why should I do the self-work? I'm the standard.
Yeah.
It's like everyone else is divergent. It's like, well, no, actually.
We were just created from their rib.
Yeah.
I was also going to bring up fetishization as well with trans women. Huge issue, as you were saying, with black women.
Yeah.
That trans women are so sexualized. Like, it's a whole category on porn websites.
Yep.
Just for this fetishization. And I wonder how that comes into the one penis policy with those dudes as well. Like, is their bisexual wife allowed to date trans women?
Let's find one and ask. Let's extend way out of our social circles to find a dude with a one penis policy.
Now I actually am interested in going to those meetups to just like bump into those dudes and like sneak on in there as a passing man and find out what their opinions are. Find all the one penis policy dudes and just like scrape their brains. Rack their no.
Pick their brains?
Pick their brains. There's a lot of ways to brain people things. Yeah. Ooh. New outing for the podcast.
Oh, gosh. Ask a straight man.
Yeah. Be one of those annoying people that brings microphones around asking people questions.
I want to be one of those annoying people. Oh, my gosh.
Ooh, at out the front of the polling booth.
Oh, gosh. Elections to the left
excuse
of
me,
elections to the right.
Do you care about anyone other than yourself?
Yeah, speaking of policy issues. One penis policies. Oh, yeah. So what are some other ways, aside from reading books, that you like to use to educate yourself, or that you would highly recommend others use to educate themselves?
I mean, I probably started with YouTube, not to brand name them, but they got a monopoly. I spoke to a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And, like, don't make people talk to you. Like, it was voluntary.
Yeah.
It was probably actually voluntary friends excitedly telling me about reading one of those books, or I started going to queer poly meetups, which was nice.
Yeah, yeah.
There I felt a lot more at home, and there was far more intersectional view of relationships, because there's no... That's the thing with being queer too. There's no just like automatic standard for a relationship. We've not been given a cultural place until recently. And so we've been making it up, which means we do tend into more like divergent relationships. I'm thinking of like the stereotype of a gay man as non-monogamous. It's kind of like, statistically, probably because there was never like this assumption of monogamy.
All right.
So we have that option to step outside of the option. We are faced or confronted with that option immediately.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like a lot of cishet couples, it's so... I don't want to assume what their lives are like, but there's a template and you can use it. And I love templates. I love like, just if I can follow a rule and I'm left alone, that's great. But we just don't get those. We don't get the easy template. And I'm sure there's their own shortcomings. As I was saying, I kind of like that I was forced to consider other options.
Yeah. And that's another reason that I really like online forums for this kind of learning, for any kind of... Yeah. So, Reddit, Facebook groups.
That's where I've done a lot of my self-discovery.
Yeah. One of the benefits to those kinds of places for learning is that you're seeing, if you're paying close attention, you can see how these conversations around intersectionality in polyamory, how they're evolving in real time. Yeah. Whereas you can look at, like the first edition of The Ethical Slut, for example, and go, does this still hold up today? Or you can look at, an R polyamory post and go, okay, this was posted 3 hours ago.
Yeah.
What is the question and how are people responding? It doesn't mean that everyone having these conversations is an expert.
Yeah.
But it's showing you where the conversations are.
I think one of the dangers I would highlight with YouTube and Reddit forums and things like that is that you also immediately see some of the challenging things you're going to face. Like the trolls are there, or there's no filter to stop the anti-them. Same with like any self-discovery. Like when I was doing all my trans stuff, you immediately see the comments of the people that go there just to make crappy comments.
Yeah.
And so if you want to be true to yourself without cultural influence, or not cultural, peer influence, peer pressure, it might be good to do some self-reflection with a book or with a curated source.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to be true to yourself without the peer pressure when you've got those dissenting voices yelling at you the whole time.
Yeah. And I think that beautifully wraps up the conversation, funneling down to the overarching point being that polyamory isn't the kind of thing you try on people. No. Please don't go out there and experiment on people and just see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Actively educate yourself on how, do the deep dives into your own psyche and actively educate yourself on how different actions and things can impact people.
my actions impact other people.
You're such an influencer. Yeah. People need to, I say this all the time, people need to stop using other people as secondary characters in their own personal development journey. It's like enough of this, like, oh, thank you for teaching me so much. Bye. It's like, okay, but you've just left me traumatized.
Yeah. And most of us don't mind doing the work with like true, genuine people who are there to give back something in the relationship.
Yeah.
I remember one of our first hangouts was me telling you all about transness.
Oh, yeah.
And like, look, we've got a relationship where we continue to give things back and forward.
Yeah. So we can learn from each other when it's all consensual and not leaning on this false sense of compassionate curiosity.
Yeah.
Because, again, compassion requires suffering with, if we're looking at the etymology, not like throwing the burden of labor onto people to educate you. That's a whole other...
I love etymology.
So do I.
New podcast.
Yes.
There's already so many.
Yeah. All right. So I feel like we've learned and discussed a lot today, haven't we, Meka?
Yeah, I've had a really good time chatting about this with you, and I feel like I want to get back into some of these books and try some of these books out.
Yeah.
Because
Can I recommend Love's Not Colorblind?
Yeah.
That's always what I shove into people's faces.
Definitely. I gonna get reading.
Nice. Okay. All right.
So, Leslie, where can people find us if they want to hear more about it, continue this conversation?
You can go to my website, leslievcoaching.com, and book a free coaching consultation with me if you'd like. We can talk more about your journey through polyamory or anything else related to getting unstuck in life and wanting to live more authentically and not by society's rules. Or Instagram at leslievcoaching, LESLIE. You can find us at your friendly neighborhood orgy center.
Address, please.
Yeah, send us some love. We love love.
We really do.
We do.
Never enough.
Never enough. I love you, Meka.
Love you, Leslie.